Good afternoon. My name is Nick Caraway, although you may refer to me as Mr. Caraway. I'm a writer, although none of my stuff actually got unpublished. A good friend of mine, known as Francis Scott Fitzgerald, more commonly known as F. Scott Fitzgerald, published one of my books under his name. He was a lovely man, graduated from Princeton University, had a lovely wife, Zelda Fitzgerald, and a lovely daughter. Although sadly he passed away at just age 44 from a heart attack. Now, the book that he did publish for me, I called The Great Gatsby after my friend Jay Gatsby, although I'll get into more about him later. Now on to the story. It mostly just talks about the experiences I had in New York. I moved to New York after serving in World War I and graduating from Yale. I moved into a neighborhood called West Egg. I lived on the opposite side of the lake from my cousin Daisy Buchanan and her husband Tom Buchanan. They are wealthy people with a huge house. On the first few days of summer, I drove myself over there for dinner where I met a woman, Jordan Baker. She was amazing. She always looked like she was balancing something on the top of her chin. I remember Jordan asking me if I knew Gatsby, but we got interrupted by a call. Tom went out quickly, and Daisy was following him angrily. Jordan told me it was his mistress calling, and when they came back in, Daisy was mad, but Tom didn't care. Shortly after, Tom and I went down to the Valley of Ashes, which connected West Egg and New York. It was also where his mistress lived. Her name was Myrtle, kind and sweet, although untruthful to her gullible husband, Mr. Wilson. After swinging by Myrtle's place and telling her to get on the first train to New York, we drove up to New York and met up at an apartment. Now, I've only gotten drunk twice in my life, and this is one of those times. Myrtle's sister came down and a couple of other people, but all I remember is Tom getting mad at Myrtle for speaking of Daisy's name. Tom got so mad that he punched her, breaking her nose. I left after that. A few days after that, I got an invitation to go to one of Gatsby's parties, in which he lived right next door to me. Later that night, I put on my suit and went down to his house. It was huge, and everyone in New York was coming. It was an amazing party. After struggling to find Gatsby, I had run into Jordan again, in which her husband wasn't happy about it, but we still hung out. I asked Jordan if she knew where Gatsby was, and to which, at a large party like that, I wasn't just asking Jordan, because I got a wave of different theories about him. Some people saying that he's killed a man, some people saying that he's a spy. It was chaos. At this point, I was a little tipsy, and I had asked the man if he knew where Gatsby was. I told him all of the theories, asking if he knew if they were true. And to my disbelief, I was talking to Gatsby himself. I felt so stupid, but he relaxed about it, which was something I personally found strange. Soon after, though, one of his butlers came up and told him something, and before he left, he invited me to go on one of his hydroplanes that next morning. I had agreed. I soon after found Jordan once more, and when another of Gatsby's butlers came up and told her that Gatsby wanted to talk with her. She was shocked. I would have been shocked too, but she of course went up and talked with him. As on my way to leave, Jordan came up and told me that she knew about Gatsby, his past, everything, which shocked me because apparently no one knew about Gatsby's past. She told me that she would tell me more about it at tea, and so I agreed. The next day, I met up with her to get tea, and what she told me was really shocking. She told me Gatsby knew my cousin, Daisy Buchanan, when she was younger. At the time, Gatsby was in the army, but had to leave to Germany to fight in the war, but they wrote letters every day. Eventually, Daisy's family got tired of waiting. She married Tom, but Gatsby still loved her, and he thought that she still loved him. That's why he bought the house where he did, and he hosted all the parties, hoping one day Daisy would attend one of them, and they would meet again. But also at the end of the dock, at Gatsby's house, he could see my cousin's house, obviously, since I can see it. But at the end of Daisy's house, there's a little green light that he would be able to stare at every night. With all that said, he came up with another plan. I would invite Daisy over, and he would just kind of come in, not realizing that Daisy was over, and they would reunite. Seemed like a pretty good plan, but I just wasn't sure if I was up for it. I didn't want to deal with Daisy being awkward, but in the end, I kind of forcefully agreed. The next day, some of Gatsby's servants were mowing my lawn, setting up my house, all pretty, although it started raining. Finally, Daisy showed up, and she came inside, amazed by all the flowers and how nice my yard looked. I was honestly amazed, too. After she sat down, there was a knock at the door, and I answered it, to which Gatsby came in, shocking. They stared at each other in shock, and things were really awkward at first. I eventually excused myself for a second and said I needed to run to the store. That was a lie. I hid behind a tree and gave them some privacy. By the time I came back, Daisy was laughing and they were staring into each other's eyes deeply. They were so happy. After multiple attempts to get their attention, I told them that the rain had stopped, and Gatsby offered to head to his house, where we hung out. We danced in the halls, threw clothes all over his bed. It was amazing. Daisy was more happy now than I had ever seen her. Soon I left to give them some more privacy, but they hit it off. After that date, Gatsby and Daisy started to have affair after affair after affair. Gatsby also kept trying to convince Daisy that she needed to break up with Tom, which ended poorly, you could say. Soon after, Gatsby had another party where Tom and Daisy attended, although Tom was very uneasy about Gatsby. So we were all invited to go to Tom's house for lunch. Yeah. When we got there, everything was going fine until Gatsby started to push Daisy to tell Tom that she didn't love him anymore. And with Tom getting more and more curious and Daisy getting more and more stressed, Daisy suggested we go downtown, and after we talked some more, we all went in two separate cars. Tom was not very excited about it, but it was what Daisy wanted. Tom, me, and Jordan went in Tom's car, and Daisy and Gatsby went into Gatsby's car. We stopped at Mr. Wilson's to get gas and found him awfully sick. And Myrtle was looking down at us through the window. She was mad at Tom. I just didn't know why at the time. I didn't know what happened in Gatsby and Daisy's car, but when they arrived at the apartment, they seemed more nervous than before. Things escalated quickly from there, and Tom and Gatsby got into a heated argument, leaving with no other option but with Gatsby trying to convince Daisy that she never loved Tom. Tom says something along the lines of, "What about our history, Daisy? Didn't you love me back then?" Causing Daisy to break. I felt so bad for Daisy. She said to Gatsby, "I love you both, but I can't lie and say I never loved Tom ever," which made Gatsby lose it. I think honestly though, yes, she loved Gatsby, but after seeing Gatsby mad, she was terrified. Daisy stormed out with Gatsby tailing her, and they drove away. Funny story now that I think about it. It was actually during this exact moment I realized it was my birthday. A whole 30 years of age I was at that moment. I don't feel for 30, but I was. Tom offered me some whiskey, but I declined and suggested we get on our way back, which was a horrible mistake, you could say. It was really dark and late by the time we had left. As we were passing by where Myrtle and her husband lived, there were police and a crowd of people. We quickly got out to figure out what was going on. As we made our way through, we realized really quickly that Myrtle was dead. She was hit by some from her car. Her and Wilson got into an argument, so she ran into the street, hoping it was Tom, but it wasn't, and inevitably died from getting hit by the car. Although I feared what I knew what car it was. I'm gonna restart. It was dark, and we were passing by where Myrtle and her husband live, and there were police and a crowd of people. We quickly got out of the car to figure out what was going on. Tom was especially curious, with it being where his mistress lived. We were making our way through the crowd of people, and we eventually found out what we didn't want to hear. Myrtle was dead. She got into an argument with Wilson, and she ran out into the streets hoping it was Tom's car. It wasn't. She was hit by the car. I feared I knew whose car it was. Tom was surprisingly not as sad as I thought he would be at the sight of his mistress dead. Although her husband, on the other hand, could barely keep it together. I don't blame the man. But it was... We got back, and Tom asked her to call a cab for me, but I dismissed it. Sat on the steps for a while and saw a familiar shadow in the bushes. As I realized it was Gatsby, I stormed up to him, all mad, but he told me to quiet down. He told me everything that happened, about how Daisy was stressed and how she told him that she was going to drive and would calm her down. In the process, this lady came running out into the streets, and in panic, Gatsby took over the wheel, trying to steer them out of the way, but hit her, causing her to die on impact. At least it was a not so painful way to die. I was about to lose it at that point. I just left after that. The days following that were just headline after headline about Gatsby, since he wasn't throwing any more parties, because apparently someone spotted his car at the crash scene. I kept trying to convince Gatsby to just run away, escape all this, but he refused, for he was hoping he could still fix things with Daisy. I kept trying to tell him, you can't recreate the past. He didn't want to believe it. One day I came over to Gatsby's house, and we were talking. He told me that he was just honestly waiting for a call from Daisy back. I knew he wasn't going to get a call from Daisy back, but I still let him hope. Shortly after, one of his servants came up and said they're going to drain the pool today before the leaves fall into it. Gatsby told him to not do it quite yet, for he hadn't used it all summer. Don't blame the man, and so he went to go for swimming. He offered me to join, and I declined. That was probably my first mistake right there. But I had to get to work. I left and got to work. While I was gone, Gatsby went for a swim. And since everyone knew his car hit Myrtle while he was swimming, Mr. Wilson came up behind him with the gun, just got out of the pool, and Mr. Wilson shot him. One clean, single shot. Right through the heart. Sorry. Gatsby fell back into the pool, of course, and there was a big commotion. I got back, and all I could think about was Gatsby. Gatsby was, once again, the only thing in the newspaper after that. Sorry. And his house looked wrecked. I felt bad for the man, especially because the only reason people came to his house after he died was to spread rumors, and no one came to his funeral. Not even Daisy. On my last day in New York, I stopped by his house to take one more walk through it. Daisy and Tom moved back to Chicago. Jordan, I have no idea where Jordan went. Probably off to play more golf. As I walked in his house, I could picture where everything had taken place. All the memories. Us tossing the clothes onto the bed as Daisy caught them. All the extravagant parties. Meeting Gatsby for the first time. But alas, they will always just be memories now. It was a sad time, and sad to say, but I'm just happy that I lived through it as well. That's pretty much where my book kind of got wrapped up. And that's where I finished my book. And with the pen I had, I titled my book Gatsby. The Great Gatsby. Hope you guys read my book sometime. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it if you're looking for something that kind of keeps you grabbing with great character development. I guess you also could say Gatsby's proof that you can't recreate the past. You can just remember it. So that's kind of what this book was about. I hope you guys give it a read, and can't wait to see you guys later.